Hello and welcome back to Dark Sun Rising. My name's Ian and 10th edition is well on the way. I've not played in 20 years and don't have an army yet, but I've chosen Tyranids and I've got my colour scheme together. I now just have to get the figures painted and get them on the table. I'm going to take you through that journey with me, so let's go to the table and get some minis painted. Well, here we are once more at the table, and hopefully today we're going to get some painting done. Last time you met with me, we based the miniatures and then painted them black in preparation for painting. Equipment that I'm going to use, these are Boldmere brushes, nothing flash, nothing expensive. These are from the works. They're around about £2 or £3 for 4 or 5 brushes, and these will be adequate to do the job. I'm quite happy with them and I can get reasonable details with them. I do have some more expensive brushes, but this is just to show you that you can actually work with basic gear and that this hobby is available to everybody. Over here I do have a wet palette, very expensive wet palette I've got going on here. This is the bottom of a Ferrero Rocher tray. If this one gets cracked, I've got the top to use as the other side. In the bottom here we have some household sponges, and these are just literally out of the pack and then cut to shape. I tend to put enough water in so that I can generate a little puddle in the corner, and that keeps the sponges wet enough for a good few hours. And then over the top we've got baking parchment, and this can be bought in packs from your local supermarket, or if you want to try and get a bit of a better deal, then you can bulk buy, but it's nothing exciting. It's baker foil, baking parchment, and you can get that for a couple of quid. Paint wise, I tend to use Vallejo and Citadel, and you'll see me swap between the two as I'm painting. There are little bits of differences between the two paints, but actually when you're looking at painting miniatures for the tabletop, you're looking for the colour that gives you the feel that you want, and then from there you just bear in mind your recipe. I have a little recipe book so that if I find a colour scheme that I'm really enjoying, then I can write that down, and then if I come back to those figures in a few years time I want to do some more, then I've got the recipe noted down so I don't forget what colours I was picking up. Here's our mini. I can see already that, if I bring him a bit closer, that we've got a little bit of work to do. There's little bits of grey on him that do need touching up. Okay, so here's our mini. We've spent our last session making sure that he was black all over. I've touched him up now to make sure that I've not missed out any areas. So quite happy with the base coat that we've got on him now. And then the question is, where do you start? And that's sort of sometimes flummoxes people as where they're going to start first. I tend to generally start on the face. One, because while I'm fresh at the beginning of the session, the fine detail required with eyes and things like that, it's nice if your motor skills are nice and fresh. And two, if you've got a nice attractive face to start with, then it sort of lures you into the rest of the model because you want to finish it and get it done. I tend to paint because I enjoy painting, so I'm not going to bother with anything. I may do some washes, but I'm not going to do anything like slap chop. I'm actually going to paint the model, and we'll just slowly work our way around the model and just have some fun getting the right colours, blending them together and seeing if we can make him look a decent miniature. So on the face, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to probably, in my head I've got a colour scheme that I want to try, and I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay down a first coat of yellow sand. So where are we? So yellow sand by Vallejo. There we go. And we'll get a little bit of that put on the model. And this is where we're going to have to be very careful to start with. And I think in my head, I think what I'm going to do is we're just gently going to dab around the eye there. And I think I want the face, so although he's not going to end up all yellow, I'm just going to do that to start with, because I've got an idea. I want sort of the face to be a little bit spectral, and I'm not watering the paints down a great deal, if at all. What I'm doing is I'm just very carefully applying a layer of virtually neat paint. It's been well shaken. I'm not doing any glazes. I just want to get the miniature with this initial coat on, and then we can start looking a bit more, being a bit more refined. A lot of tutorials talk about doing layer by layer washes and glazes, and now just a little bit of stippling. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the colour back into the head, and we'll look at blending that in, and we'll have I don't know, maybe a little bit like something like Predator, that type of a, you know, the skin tone blends back into the flesh tones and then sort of disappears off into the body. So focus not too bad. Okay, so it is literally, we're just going yellow sand, and we'll just do the other side now, exactly the same process. So I'll start at the eye and just run around, make sure we're not going too close, catch the tops just above the teeth. If it looks like the brush is getting a bit dry, then what I will do is I will give the brush a little, and it is starting to retain a little bit of dry paint. And that's when you're going to start to make mistakes, because the brush gets a little bit stiffer than it was when you first started, and you're starting to get a bit of paint retention in it, and your accuracy goes. Another thing you'll find with some of these cheaper brushes, so there we go, give it a wash. With these cheaper brushes, what you'll find is that after a while the tip curls, but you can use that to your advantage. What you can do is use that little edge to catch detail with, and it can actually be your friend. And another thing to do is, as once you've washed a brush, is make sure you wipe the shaft. Sometimes you'll get a little droplet sticking on the shaft, and then what happens is while you're painting, the droplet runs down and then blobs a load of paint all over your figure. So I'm just going to paint all this section yellow, like I said. So I'll finish this off, and then you can come back once I've done that. So I've had a little rethink, is rather than let it dry, I'm going to do what I would normally do when I'm painting, and that's maximise my time. So that is going to take a few minutes to dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get on with maybe doing the top of the carapace here while that dries, so that while one piece of the model's drying, I'm actually cracking on with the next piece. So I've already decided the plates, what colour I'm going to go for there. And I've decided that dark green is actually going to be my base for the armour, but it's going to come through to quite a pale colour. And especially on the bigger creatures, I'm going to go really, really pale. And I think a good transition is going to be if I start with something like dark green, which is one of the game colours by Vallejo. And then I'm going to move to a transition colour of lime green. Again, it's a Vallejo colour. And then upper levels, I'm going to go to a yellow green, again a Vallejo colour. And then at the very, very highlight, I'm going to go bright ivory by Pro Acryl. I'm also going to use a little bit of base tone black in there as well with the initial dark green, just to, so what I want is, I want in the beginning of the armor plate, I want it to be really, really dark, and then little bits of colour creeping, and then right at the edges we go really, really bright, and I want it to be really switched on. One of the things that you need to bear in mind when you're actually doing this is you're viewing your figure from 3 to 6 feet away. So you actually need to make sure that it's got big contrast in it and it's vibrant. If you're painting dark colour schemes, it's going to look a bit boring on the table. So just try to get a little bit of vibrancy in there, or big contrast changes, so there's some good strong definition when you're looking at your miniatures. They're much more pleasing to look at like that. So I'll bring the palette in so you can see what I'm doing when I'm mixing. So here we've got the black. And what I'll do is I'll take a little bit of black and chuck it over there, not diluting it, you notice. Lump of the green, we'll run it nearby. I've got some black on my brush, we'll mix the two together, and then I'll bring the black over just and mix the two until I'm happy with the consistency, and then I'll rub off the paint and I'll twist the brush to keep the shape of the brush nice. I'll wash it in some water and give it a good clean, and when I clean it, let's just move the miniature out of the way, I put the brush on and twist the brush as I just drag it across the paper as I'm clearing the paint out. A little flick in the water again and then drag it backwards, and now we're looking that the trace is clear. You can see the initial one had some black in it. The brush is looking a lot better now, and when I'm actually painting, I'm just trying to get like the front third of the brush with paint on it. Now, because I'm not glazing, because I'm actually painting with quite thick paint, then it won't go into the core of the brush and act as a reservoir. It will sit at the tip of the brush, and so it's quite a different technique used to when you're actually glazing a miniature. And then what I'm going to do, let's just turn the autofocus back on and see if it'll kick in. There we go, that's better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start about here, so just away from the edges of the black, and this is dark green mixed with black, and it will dry a very dark colour. So we're going to cover around about 2/3 of a plate. And we'll go on the other side. There we go. And I'm going to sort of use a little bit of wet blending here, and then I'm going to stop doing that after I've done it for a little while. So because this is quite neat paint, it will dry fairly quick. And we'll just flick a little bit underneath the edges of the miniature as well, just get a bit of colour going on underneath so it's not all boring. And planning ahead, I'm planning on bringing some green in underneath here as well, underneath the armor plates here, onto the face area. Okay, so those ridges, I'm going to bring some green onto those and bring some green down into the edge of the face. So planning ahead, I will just swipe those as well, leave some green on the underside at the edges as there. That's good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do this one plate at the back here, but then what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish it off and then come back to the face. So I'll show you the one plate so you can see the technique. I'll then work over the rest of the plates, come back to the face, and then we'll carry on with the face. So the next step is to go to just dark green, which is still on its own is a very dark colour. I've not cleaned my brush. I'm just mixing a bit of what I already had on in with the dark green I've just picked up, and this time we're now going to cover about half of the plate. And in my head, what I'm doing is setting where the highlights are going to go. So I'm concentrating the paint where the highlights are going to be, so that I'm stepping away from the shadow and just concentrating on this back edge here where I want there to be, so, and along the edges as well. Just keep the edges touched up a little bit as well. Just run a bit under the edge again, take that colour underneath, give it a bit of follow, so that when you look at the model from the side, it's not just looking a little unfinished. Right, okay. So I'm also going to run some of the green onto those side panels again, just a little bit under there, just a little flick along the edge, and that's in preparation for the next step. A little bit harder to work backhanded, but we're going to get under there, no problem at all. Okay, there we go. Right, so we're still looking virtually black, but it's building colour. So the next colour is lime green. Let's get that on the palette. And it's much better to transition through your colours. So I haven't cleaned my brush. I may actually clean it just a bit, and it's not really to clean it. If you look, I'm going to leave some colour on. It's more to get it wet to mix the two together. And I'm going to bring some of the green across. And even if this dries out, what you're doing is leaving yourself a colour scheme behind. So you can see what colour you went to next. So that's the colour you've got to mix to again the next time. So now we're going to start to see something happen as this colour goes on. So we're just going to gently bring it in the edge, and in my head I'm just imagining little aspects of colour appearing. So we're coming down. Let's give it a little bit more touch there, otherwise we're going to end up with not much room to highlight on. Going to go for most of the top of that fin, and then we're going to come down the side here. And this step and the next few steps are where the magic starts to happen. Now, in species, you get some variation. So from model to model, in something like a creature, a Tyranid, there is going to be some variation because, well, they're animals. Whereas when you're looking at Space Marines and their armour, then what you're looking for is regularity. So when you're looking at painting your Nid, you're trying to achieve a level of irregularity model to model, but to keep a cohesive scheme. As opposed to Space Marines, where you're trying to keep a cohesive and repetitive scheme with reproducibility. Both are equally hard to achieve, and it is just practice in making sure that you get the same consistency in your colours. And now we're just going for just the plain green, so we're coming to a more distant highlight from the base of the scale now. I'm just going to very, very gently just catch the edges of the model here. Oh, let me come back into the image. Just going to very, very gently catch the edges of the model. And again, in my head, I'm thinking, where are those highlights going to be? Let's pop those on there. Yeah. Okay. And then there's like a secondary fin here. We'll just have a little stroke onto that. A little touch of the edge here. Okay, and then we'll come a little bit further up and highlight the top there. You can actually do a little bit of a broken line if you want it. Sometimes it looks a little bit more effective than the having the whole of the top of the fin, and then just touch the back end here. And you can, rather than just have like just the edges and just like blobs, you can actually put a little bit of pattern into this, and maybe so you go for the edge, so you define where the edge is, but also maybe just some little blobs. And then what we're going to do is we're going to highlight inside those blobs, because that's part of where the light is catching, and that's where the shine is happening. So we're going to just stroke down that line there. Lovely. Just wet the brush a bit, it's getting a bit dry again. And right, so we're just going to catch up the edge of this. And then what I'll do is I'll try and get a little bit better image for you. So if we come in, we're just starting to get now a little bit of a feeling of shape in the model. And we've also caught the edges, and we've started to make a little bit of work on the underside. Now at the moment it might look a little bit boring, but we're now going to go to yellow and green. Okay. And what you see that I tend to do is very often I work in 3 colours and work my way up to a highlight, discounting the upper highlight as a colour. So I'm going to get a little bit of the green from there and mix that with this one, and we're just coming a shade paler. Now this was really going to make things pop. We're going to see some real nice transition here, but this is like getting to the really upper highlights now. And if there's little cracks where there are breaks where the monster's been caught in battle, try to make sure that you do actually catch around those and don't wander into the grooves, and it will naturally give you an extra little bit of definition and give you a little bit of texture. So as I come up the edge here, there's a little crack, we'll ignore that. We'll come round, we'll touch that a little bit here, just a little bit of blob in here, give it a bit of colour down there. Right, and then to the bright green, and we're really literally now working on the edges here. Just giving it a little bit of pop at the edges. But once you see the complete carapace done on the head, and then just on these edges here, yeah, just catching a little bit again. Once you actually see the complete head piece done, it will be, I am sure, a case of wow, that really does look quite effective. Okay. Alright, so we're getting a bit of colour going on. It looks quite dark still, but as you get the scales in front also getting coloured, then that's going to bring the whole thing together as a whole. At the moment it looks quite black, but once you get the others coloured, it's going to be a very different story. So now we're going to add in a little bit of the bright ivory for the final highlight. And then we'll get a little bit of the green, blob that over there, get the ivory, mix it in. Now this ivory is quite a potent colour, so you don't need a great deal to do a lot of lightning in the green. And we'll just backstroke the brush just to get a really nice edge on it. We'll come over to the miniature, and then we really are talking right on the extremes here. There, that's lovely. Maybe just a tiny dab on the back edge and on this back edge. And then where these little clipped holes are on the side, I will just extra highlight, tiny bit though, around them to make them stand out. Okay, looking good. So I'm going to stop there, and then I'm going to finish off the head, and I'll come back to you and see what you think. Okay, so that's the top of the carapace done on his head. I think you can start to see the colours starting to come together now a bit. I've turned the luminosity of my lamps down a bit. I think they were bleaching out some of the colour. And now we can go back to the face. You can see that we've now dried. It's quite pink. We're going to take some of that pink out of there, and I'm going to head towards a more ghostly look. So what we're going to do is get the yellow again first, and just retouch up the areas, And then I'm going to actually add another layer of contrast. So let's just very carefully, that's better, you can see a bit better there. Get that paper out of the way because that's it. And we're just going to, on the very highlights, we're just going to strike the highlights with the brush, like tops of the teeth, on the jaw lines, just get that bit of detail back. And we can start to see that we're getting a little bit of the yellow back through again. Don't want it to get too bright, because actually that yellow needs to blend with the green. Let's work our way around the head. Just gently dabbing onto all the upper surfaces, just getting those highlights back. So again, crests is where we're headed, jaw lines, corners of the gums, and just a little bit of a blob there on the tongue. So what we'll do is, if we make a mistake like that, we'll just get some water on the brush, put the water where we've made the mess, clean the brush again, water on where we've made the mess, and rather than repaint and leave more and more layers, we actually just get rid of our mistake. There's a tiny little bit of a yellow line there, so we'll get rid of that yellow line with a bit of black. There we go. And we've not just added more layers to our paint. So we've now got a bit of yellow back, but I want this to go more ghostly yet, but I want to not lose the contrast. So I'm going to get a bit of, again, Citadel paint. This is Garagax Sewer, and that's a contrast paint which I'm going to, now this is quite a dark colour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually run out of palette. Let me just go down here, put a little bit of that on the palette, and that really is a little bit, and then a bit of water in there, and then back to the miniature, and then in the recesses of the shadows, back of the jawline, I'm just going to create a little bit of extra shadow underneath the jaw where we've painted yellow. We'll flip over to the other side. And again, exactly the same placement. Underneath the jaw this side as well. And that's, although it's done very, very little, each layer is helping towards give us a final picture. Now what I'm going to do is come away from the mouth, let that dry a bit. I'm going to reblend the head. So we've got all these greens mixed from just doing the top of the helmet. So I'm actually going to start to bring some of those in underneath now to where we're working. So just touching in at the edges here and stroking where the little vents are on the sides of the helmet. Helmet? Skull. Okay. Alright, so you can see a little bit of definition going on now. So now we're going to go from the yellow sand, and we're going to start to mix in some pale sand. Again, a Vallejo colour. Quick shake just before we apply it. Okay. And then a little bit of the yellow across, and let's mix those two together. Ooh, I'll clean my brush very well there. Let's get that green out. So we'll bring the yellow back across onto a new pile. Yellow sand across there, that's it, we've got those. And now I'm going to wipe off the excess, clean the brush, really clean the brush down, nice and clean, and just a tiny little bit of paint on the tip, and then stroke it back. And then really going to go for the highlights now, so just on the edges of the jaw. And we'll touch around here. Just get this colour pulled back to a bit more pale again now. Work our way around the face. Okay. Right, let's go back to the green for the underside of the helmet. Keep calling it a helmet, it's a skull. Okay. So again, this side like I did the other side, just stroke those lines in, and the one at the back. Okay. Now although the green looks quite vibrant when you first apply it, it does actually go off quite quick and become dark. And we're going to bring the green down into the skull. So I'm going to mix, if you look at the back of the palette, some of the lime green in with the dark green. And then we're going to just dot it at the edges and start to blend in with that yellow that we transitioned in there earlier. Work it back towards that back piece. Okay, that's lovely. Now we'll get a bit of the lighter greens in. Back to the palette, mixing the lighter greens in. And again, we'll dab those in. Run them just on the edges to blend them into those lines. This is more stippling actually than, now we'll go to a bit to the yellow. And again, bring in a little bit of the colour. Now the thing we don't want to forget is the colour we started from. So we need to pick a little bit of that up. And then back to the edge of the jawline and just drop a little bit of that colour back in. And then I've just wiped a little bit of the paint off, and now I've done that, I can actually move the paint around that's on the miniature already into the other paint that's there. And that's going to give me quite a nice flash of colour behind, although I've got this quite ghosted up on the face. And I'm going to go over that a little bit again. Actually, I want it paler, so the ivory I'm going to mix in with the yellow that we're using, and I'm going to take it quite pale and just another layer of highlights on those higher points. I really do want this to come across as quite pale when I'm done. Try not to overdo things too much. I think we might take a little bit off actually, so it was still wet, so we've got time to play with it. And then I think we might just grab a little bit of the lupus pink and just pop that back in. And then just retouch that highlight again. Okay, so most of the head is now painted, but the thing that's really going to make this pop is getting those teeth done and completing the tongue. Once they're done, because most of the focus goes to the face, that will really set the scene. The eyes themselves, I've already decided I'm going to keep a pitch black, but with that bright highlight in there just to make them look even more sinister. So let's get some paint mixed. So on the palette, I'm going to get a little bit of foxhide. That's a green stuff product. I'm going to get some of the dark and bright ivory by Pro Acryl, and we'll use those. I'm going to use a glaze wash of Reichland Flesh by Citadel to set the overall tone. We'll leave that for the time being. We'll get on with the painting first. So here's our miniature, and we'll go straight into the teeth with the foxhide. In fact, if I go from the side and stroke across the teeth, it probably get even better coverage and quicker. Yep. Have a look at them from the front. And again, we'll stroke across them from the side. Do the bottom teeth as well. And same again on this side of the jaw. Mix a little bit of the foxhide over with the dark ivory. And try and get it a little bit further up the teeth. Okay. Then a bit of the bright ivory mixed in with the previous colours. Check you're out catching the teeth on the front as well. This brush is just starting to split, so we'll give it a quick wash. And we'll just go back in and we'll just clean up the tongue where we've made a little bit of a mess. We've caught the tongue a little bit with our paint, mainly because that brush was splitting. That looks tidier again. Then we'll get our dark green. I've still got some left from before, so we'll bring that over and we'll paint the tongue dark green. We probably would have made our life a lot easier for ourselves if we'd done this before the teeth, but not to worry. We've still not quite finished the teeth yet, so don't worry there. They're not going to remain quite as down. I'm just giving them a little chance to dry while we do something else. So we're just going to finish the tongue off, and all the tongue goes dark green, and you probably can't see the dark green very well at all because it is such a dark green. There we go. Okay. Right, so while that dries, back to the teeth, and we'll get the pale ivory. Catch the teeth again. Right, leave that to dry, pick the dark green back up. I've caught the tongue just a little bit with the ivory. That needs to go back to being darker. Mix a little bit of black in with the green because the ivory is obviously really shone that part of the tongue, so I'm just going to re-darken that up. That's lovely. And then we'll go to our lime green. I'm going to make quite a jump in transition here because we want this to stand out. Now inside the tongue there's like a little mound there where the proboscis of the tongue comes out and has like a thorn on the end and stabs you, but on this particular tongue it's actually just that part in the mouth that hasn't fired off yet. So I'm going to try and catch that separately and just run a tiny little bit of highlight onto that, and then a separate highlight onto the tongue itself. So we've really made life tricky for ourselves by painting the tongue after the teeth. Okay, so I'm going to catch the midsection of the tongue, just gently stroke. The tongue sort of is like a U shape, so at the top of the U here we're going to try and catch a lot of colour, then as the bottom of the U we're going to try and catch less colour, and then as the tongue flicks up, again a bright flash of colour. And what that will do is that will emphasise the three-dimensional aspect of the tongue, really make it pop when you look at the face. So again we'll just try and catch that all from here. Blob on the tip of the tongue. Right, so now the tongue is looking green, but now we want to really set the aspect of the tongue and start to make it look even more three-dimensional. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to just catch that little proboscis thing in the mouth, just down on the very tip, so we set it. Down the side of the tongue with this highlight. Just gently catching it. Tip of the tongue. Nice bit of flash of colour again. opposite side of the tongue and the tip of the proboscis again. Yeah, that's looking good. And now we're going to go to a really, really bright highlight, the yellow green that we used earlier, and mix a bit of ivory with it. Okay, so now this time we're going to do the very tip of the tongue. Just touch down the side on the front so you catch a bit of flash of colour as well from there, and at the side. Okay, and then ivory with a little bit of the green in, really, really bright highlight now, right on the tip of the tongue, and just not quite into the middle of the tongue, just more at the sides really. And then with some gloss paint on it, that's going to look wet. So that's really brought the mouth together, but there's just one thing left to do, and we'll just reshake my Reichland Fresh by Citadel. Good shake. I will hold the Citadel bottle firmly and I will put some onto the palette, closing the lid immediately. Citadel paints are notorious for exploding all over the table. Just that cap design is it's a mine waiting to go off. So I'm just at the very, very base of the teeth, just touching them with the Reichland Fresh, just to get a little bit of natural shade at the base of the teeth, where the gum line is. That's it. Now all I've got to do is to do two tiny, tiny, minuscule dots on the eyes. To make them look like they're alive. I just caught the underside of the carapace, just there. There we go. Not quite. Okay, so two little dots on the eyes. Now for the other side. Okay, and that's the head complete. Well, that concludes another video. Really enjoyed producing it. Hope you have too. If you did, please do like and subscribe. In the next video, I'm going to try something slightly different. I'm going to try and make things a little bit more punchy, maybe a little bit more piece to camera type of stuff in there. I'm learning this as I go, but I want to try and improve my presentation so that you guys enjoy the content. Please do carry on watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. But what do we say here on Darkstorm Rising? Are we painting yet? Hell yeah! Catch you soon.